I've got lights, I've got a lens. Let's talk about it. Here to talk about a lens that a lot of you have been asking me to review over the coming weeks. I've had it in my hand. I've been a little bit quiet about it on social media. Here it is. The Tamron 70-180 F2.8 Di3 VXD on the Sony A9II. Now, this is not going to be a camera review. This is going to be a lens review. But for those who want to know my thoughts on the A9II, we'll be doing a review in the coming weeks. Cliff Notes version of it is fantastic camera, but Sony, where's my XQD or CF Express card slot? Just putting that out there. Anyway, let's talk about the lens. Before we do, I want to thank Tamron Singapore for helping us with the lens. I want to thank Sony Singapore for helping us with the camera. Having said that, my thoughts only. No one is paying or sponsoring us for this video. Let's get down to talk about the lens. Let's talk about design for a moment. Now, the looks of this lens is pretty much the same as all the other FE mount Tamron lenses out there. Pretty nondescript. It's not a flashy lens by any stretch of the imagination. It's black, white lettering, that's it. You're not gonna see any crazy gold rings or orange rings or anything like that. And the one thing I do like about this lens though is that it's black for a 70-180. I know a lot of people out there like the gray and white telephoto lenses. I get it, I like it for a statement, but sometimes if you wanna be a little nondescript, a black telephoto lens works wonders. The Tamron fits that bill 100%. Besides that, it's a very lightweight lens, and it's actually shorter than the 70-200 F2.8 by Sony, and a lot lighter. That's a weight. That or I need to go back to the gym after this lockdown's over. The one thing you're gonna notice about the design over anything else is that it's a telescopic zoom versus an internal zoom like the Sony. There's pros and cons to that, which I'll talk about in just a bit. But nonetheless, let's talk about what is inside of this lens. First off, you've got floating elements. You've got 6 low dispersion elements, 3 spherical elements, 19 elements, 14 groups, a rounded 9-bladed diaphragm, f2.8 up to f22. Your macro reproduction ratio is 1:2, so you can get some beautiful macro shots out of this lens, like the rest of the Tamron FE lineup. Now, this lens is half the weight of the Sony G Master 70-200, coming in at 1.78 pounds or 810 grams. Part of that weight reduction is due to the fact that this lens does not have image stabilization inside of it. Not a deal breaker. There's still IBIS inside the Sony bodies, but something to take note of. This lens, the filter thread on the front is 67 millimeters, but on the back of it, it looks a little interesting. Looks like Tamron was thinking of a teleconverter in the near future, so Tamron, if you're on the fence, don't be. Bring the teleconverter. Also, the lens is weather resistant, so you can bring it out in some rain and you're gonna be good to go. Anyway, now for the specs. Let's talk about what it's like to use. The first thing you're gonna notice when you put this lens on your Sony body is actually how light it is. Now, I mentioned weight a few times in this review already because it needs to be mentioned again. This does not feel like a 70 to 180 millimeter lens at all. It feels like an 85 millimeter lens on the Sony body. Now, the 70-200, you see this tripod mount? Sometimes you're gonna need this tripod mount, all right? Stress on the frame, balancing, weight, all that. This lens doesn't come with a tripod mount. You don't need it. As I mentioned before, it is a very light lens. And you know what's great about that is because if you're gonna go, let's say on long walks or hikes, or if you're doing some sort of wedding photography and you're going to really obscure locations, you don't wanna carry a lot of weight with you as much as possible because you already gotta carry lights and stands and everything else. Anything that can reduce the weight in your bag or on your shoulder is welcome. This lens will answer that for you. Next, autofocus. You know, when we talk about third-party lenses, sometimes you always have to take in consideration they might not focus as quick as native lenses. Not the case with this Tamron. I don't know the secret sauce that Tamron and Sony have worked together on, but this thing focuses as quick, if not quicker, than the Sony 70-200. It is lightning fast and it's precise. I have had no issues with focusing whatsoever throughout the time I've used this lens. So do not worry about that at all. Image quality. Wow. I am impressed. This lens is sharp. and it's got great resolving power. Compared to the Sony, I can't see a difference. I could even say the Tamron could even be slightly sharper. Obviously, it's a newer lens, so maybe Tamron's improved some things that Sony left behind on the older one, but I would love to have tested this lens with the Sony A7R IV because the resolving power is so good, it would perform beautifully on the 61 megapixel sensor out of that camera. It really would. The images I got out of the A9II were very, very impressive. Now, disclaimer, my images aren't fantastic. They're more sample shots because we're in lockdown mode. I really can't go a lot of different places, but nonetheless, I tried my best to give you an idea of how the images look and the quality of image. Let's talk about the lack of 20 millimeters. Is it a deal breaker? No. Here is a secret tip for you. Walk closer to your subject. Now, I understand you can say, Bobby, I'm at a zoo. I got a fence. I can't get closer. No, but even if you lean in slightly, you're going to be fine. A little bit of crop with the cost savings on this, trust me, you're not going to miss the 20 millimeters. It's not a big deal at all. I thought it might be a bigger deal, but after using it, I really wasn't missing that extra 20 millimeters. It's very, very minute. One thing about this lens I do want to tell you about in terms of videography for you video people out there, you might not prefer this lens for a couple of reasons. First off, if you want to use it on a gimbal, because it has this telescopic zoom on this, right? This can mess up with your weight if you're doing your balancing and everything else like that. It's not a big zoom, but it's something that you need to take note of. But if you're keeping it at 70 millimeters throughout the time, then no issues at all. There is some slight focus breathing on this. It's not a big deal, but it's something that you just need to take note of when you use this lens. If you are okay with those two other things, you're gonna love the image quality that comes out of this lens for that. So another point that a lot of people have been making is the fact that the focusing and zoom rings are reversed on the Tamron versus the Sony. To me, it's not a big deal. I mean, I test a lot of different cameras out there and a lot of different lenses, and I'm constantly having to relearn or learn new ways of handling these cameras and lenses. So I get used to things in about 5 to 10 minutes, and then pretty much throughout the weeks I'm using it, it becomes second nature to me. And the same thing with this Tamron lens. So I don't find an issue with it. Some people do, but if you buy the lens, you use it, you'll get used to it, no time flat. Let's talk about my final thoughts on this lens. You know, after using it for the past couple weeks, I realized something, that this lens came out at the right time. And I'll explain why. You know, we're all facing really hard times economically. And our industry as a whole, photography, cameras, events, advertising, everything has slowed down to almost zero. And I know a lot of you photographers out there who have had to put your gear on a shelf and get a secondary job to pay the bills to support the family, and I respect you for that. When I see people having to sell their gear because they need to pay their bills, my heart breaks. You know, because this is a passion of theirs. And I know some of you out there will maybe even take up photography as perhaps a secondary source of income to help when times get better. And they will get better out there. And for those who are on a budget, but you want really good image quality, you want to give to your clients the best you possibly can, this Tamron answers that. The image quality between these two lenses, you really can't tell the difference. And the Sony, phenomenal lens. I love it. But it's double the price of the Tamron. And I would say for those of you out there who are on a budget, go for the Tamron. You're not going to miss some of the things that the Sony has. If you are a person that lives on the 70-180, you already have the Sony lens, you don't need to buy this lens unless you need a backup. If you need a backup, great, get it. But I will tell you, for those out there who are looking for a solid 70 to 200 range lens at a price point that is not going to break the bank, but give you fantastic image quality, go for the Tamron. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this lens. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like always, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. If you like this video, you might not like the products, but if you like the video, click on like below the video because that helps us out a lot. With that, be safe, take care, talk to you soon.